everyone. My name is Mark Callahan. I'm lead product marketing here at Strata. I'm joined by Aldo Pietropaolo, who's actually our field CTO. And Aldo, I'm thrilled to have you here because we're just going to talk a little bit about zero trust architecture and how this
Oh,
fits
my
into the
favorite.
world of agentic identity. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's glad to be here. Hello, everyone out there, everyone that's watching this series. Really appreciate your time. I hope it's worth it.
Absolutely. Well, Aldo, you and I talk a lot about, actually, you're one of the people that I look up to as a mentor. You've taught me a
Oh,
lot in
thanks,
your
brother. Yeah.
background. I'm going to make you
Man.
blush on this, but
Yeah.
you've been in this industry for so long, and you have had just, I mean, you've been
Yeah, that's true.
watching everything it change and evolve. But right now we're on the cusp of something really new, which is as we start thinking about agentic users, and where they fit into the equation. And as a product marketer, I'm always listening to like what Gartner has to say. And a couple of interesting things I saw from Gartner were that, as in terms of adoption, they're predicting that by next year, 30% of enterprises will have adopted autonomous AI agents to a degree. But I also was reading that on another report that they're saying that by 2028, 90% of organizations that allow humans to share credentials with AI agents will have to make significant investment to undo this design due to security and compliance issues,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
both stand to reason, right?
Yeah.
Zero trust architecture, you know this well. Like if I were to define it, I would say trust never, verify always. Like that's the oversimplified
That's
thing.
pretty much it.
You've got something a little different that you wanted to share.
Oh, interesting. You're gonna bring that up, right, Mark?
I already. All
All right.
right. Yes.
No,
Where are
this
we?
is great. Yeah, zero trust. So first and foremost, I mean, Gartner's research is always valuable, right? So I want to kind of clarify that. So the stuff you're reading, and even some of the stuff that I'm reading, it's eye-opening. So it's first and foremost opening to me in particular the fact that a lot of organizations are not AI production ready, meaning that they are testing the waters, rightfully so. So they're being very guarded as to how they're implementing their agentic platforms and the way they're setting up their agents, and doing a lot of research and development work, and even test pilots, and seeing what the agents can do on behalf of other agents, on behalf of users, etc. So I want to kind of clear the air first, saying that it is very much in flux, especially in the identity industry. Standards are not even nowhere near being complete. In fact, they're just starting. Standard, working
They are.
groups are just starting to think about the agentic problem and how to take advantage of the goodness that the industry and everyone, our colleagues in the identity and access management industry, have provided in the past 2 decades, and they're asking, can we reuse some of this stuff? And if so, how can we reuse it, and how do we make it applicable to agents or agentic frameworks and AI frameworks that are geared towards the enterprise? Which arguably you may make an argument that, is AI, actually ready for the enterprise? Most implementations are very individual based or personal based, like us going to ChatGPT or Claude, or interacting with different LLMs, and doing research, doing coding. If you're a Cursor user, a VS Code user with Copilot. But I haven't seen major production ready AI business platforms, if that makes sense, where the AI, and when I mean AI business platforms, I mean that the AI is fully aware of that particular business context, what the business does, what the business operating environment, business applications, business infrastructure, business data. That data is a big thing, so let's put a pin on that, right? Because
Okay.
it deals with privacy and so forth. But all this stuff, the architecture and infrastructure within a large enterprise, um, and I'm going back to your zero trust question, so I haven't
Okay. Yep.
forgotten.
No, I
But
got you.
but you know, it's going to be interesting because everything is in flux at the moment, and then on top of that, trying to rope in a ZTA or zero trust architecture model or approach into the agentic or AI world is going to be, in my opinion, a very difficult task to do, because right now AI uses trust first architecture. All right,
Ooh,
TFA.
there's the hook.
There's
All
the
right.
hook.
I said trust never because that's what we were taught, the zero trust architecture or zero trust principles were trust never, verify always. But you just suggest trust first.
Trust first. Can you
Ooh,
believe that? It's a crazy
spicy. I like,
concept.
okay, no,
Yeah.
but say more, say more.
So the trust first approach would be trusting you until you give me a reason not to trust you. And that could look like in many different scenarios, permutations, etc. But ZTA, zero trust, is never grant access, always deny until you prove that you are authorized and authenticated and so forth to access that resource. Well, AI and agentic platforms were released in their first iterations with really trusting the user behind the interface. Meaning that, for example, if you go to Claude and launch, integrated with an MCP server in the Claude client, and you start prompting the LLM and so forth, and if the LLM needs additional context, it can leverage the local MCP service, which, by the way, most of them are not heavily protected today. That's going to change, right? So that's one topic to keep in mind. That's why people like me and many others like me in the identity industry are looking now towards how can we help customers be protected from rogue agents, right? But today you could do a lot of damage. So that would explain why most projects are in research and development phases, and they're just being tested out in isolated infrastructures before a customer a customer actually gets to the point where they implement that into production. So
And
what
that
I'm yeah
experimentation also probably entails using homegrown, home rolled agents as
oh,
well, as
yes,
opposed to agent platforms, external public platforms. Like that's still a ways out, even. Like right now, it's that experimentation with the things you can truly control and keep in
correct.
bounds.
Correct,
Okay.
correct, and so which is rightfully so, right?
I mean, it makes
Because if
sense, right?
you,
Like we're not saying anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
People
no,
would be
that's
nodding their
awesome.
head in the audience right now saying, sure.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because you don't want to bring in any rogue agents. It sounds like an interesting spy story, but any rogue agents into your environment, because it's really dangerous from a compliance perspective as well, from an audit perspective as well, which we'll get into audit. But um, going back to trust first architecture, right? There's cryptographic ways that you can establish trust within platforms, so it's nothing new actually. And you can establish public key infrastructure methods of ensuring that things are encrypted, things are signed at rest, as well as in transit. And when I say at rest, is that's also a critical piece to agentic platforms. Is customers in the enterprise now need to take into account data at rest more than ever, because data is what the LLMs need in order to establish context. And that's how LLMs are useful to agents. And so when an agent is taking an action, it needs to understand the context, it needs to understand its role, it needs to understand what the intent of the action is. That is critical because the world is changing now from what does the agent have access to what is its intent and what is its goal. And those are completely different paradigms from a static list of access control mechanisms or role-based access control or attribute-based access control. And add on top of that that the agent right now is semi-autonomous. Semi-autonomous because, it still relies on the big brain, on the LLM, to do its job. It's not that intelligent like the model is, if that makes sense. The agents do things, but it's not a model in and of itself. So right now, they're not 100% autonomous. That's another myth that's out there, right? And by the way, they're not 100% ephemeral if they're actually going to be useful. Why? Ephemeral meaning
You can
temporary,
repurpose it. I want a
right?
worker. I want to keep them
Right.
around. Yeah.
Right, Mark. So they need to remember, right? They need to have memory of what they
Memory.
were doing, what their role is, what the intent is, and what the infrastructure looks like, and what MCP servers are in the environment, and all this other stuff, right? So that's kind of one myth that I've been encountering in the wild as I talk to, colleagues and friends and customers and so forth. And then the other one is kind of a misunderstanding of what MCP servers do. MCP servers, from what I have researched, and again, big disclaimer, audience, I don't claim to be an expert, on agentic platforms, but I have been digging deep in this. So I know a bit. And that bit that I know is, for example, things like MCP servers were created and specifically to give LLMs context of the environment so that the LLM is useful. It wasn't created to be yet another proxy server abstracting APIs or anything else. It was strictly created so that the model can ask, I need more data, or the agent says, I need more data. Who
Where
has
do I
that
get the data?
data? Where do I get the data? Oh, here's a standard way of requesting data outside of the LLM so that I can create context around that data. So that's literally what the MCP servers do. They go get data, or they get some stuff to feed it back to the big brain, as I call it, to the LLM, so that it then responds properly to the agent, and then the agent takes it from there. And then in this case, the agent is semi-autonomous and it says, okay, based on this dynamic response, I'm going to take this action with this other intent because it's aligned to my overall goal, you know, which my goal is reduce, 10 kilowatt hours to 5 kilowatt hours in this span of time so that I don't have to, pay a significant light bill. Just to give an example,
Okay.
the other goal could be analyze, the accounting numbers for the past 3 years. Tell me where I can gain some efficiencies in my, net income, et cetera, et cetera. And that's my goal, is to like make the accounting practice more efficient, more effective. So in in actuality, what's happening here and what I see happening is that AI in and of itself is now going through a big metamorphosis, a big change from just being personally used by you and I as kind of like assistants to do research development. Maybe I ask Cursor to write a function that would take me, a couple of hours. It'll do it like in a couple of minutes, and then I review it and do a full code review. So, yep, that's good. But it's transitioning from that towards more like, okay, how do you apply AI and agentic platforms and safely give them business goals? So you know how we use KPIs? Some
Sure.
organizations use KPIs. It's very similar. Instead of giving a KPI to a human, you give it to an agent, and then the agent takes it from there. But of course, it's going to need a lot of information from the organization. And in order to have that adoption of the AI be received properly and adopted by businesses and actually used to achieve those goals and outcomes, they need to be in a trust first stance, right?
That's
Because
so interesting. Again, I'm just trying to get my head around
yeah,
this trust first scenario because
yeah,
so as I think about zero trust architecture and the way that it sort of progressed along, we got to this world where it was like, um, it was a model that was put against the existing state of identity. Like it was decades worth of identity, and then we got to this place where all of a sudden it's like the perimeter wasn't good enough because if somebody was inside the perimeter and we let them just do whatever everything else, that was like where the zero trust really started to pick up steam. Was like, hey, as long as they're inside, we can trust them to do whatever they want to do. And then you realize if the bad person got inside, they would run rampant, and that doesn't work. So you had to get more and more granular with zero trust. Thinking about the architecture of agents and this trust first scenario, like we have a chance to do this from the ground up. So instead of
right.
like trying to come in and put it, a new model against old architecture or old
Yep,
design, we have a chance to do both in tandem. Are there things we learned from traditional IAM that we're going to take forward here architecturally?
maybe,
Okay.
maybe. But artificial intelligence is a completely different computing paradigm altogether. So that's going to be interesting in kind of transposing legacy identity and access management infrastructures and methods and protocols and et cetera, because it's the whole operating model of the software that's taking actions in the enterprise is fundamentally different, and it is dynamic in nature as well. So not ephemeral, which is, spin up, spin down, spin up. It's like, it's dynamic. It can actually, through very complex math, think, quotations, right? Think, because it's not sentient like a human. That'll never happen. But it can reason, right? And it can take dynamic paths based on context. So current identity and access management paradigms are not as dynamic, fairly static. Current constructs will have difficulty with that dynamism, especially with that intent. Is it the right
Hmm.
intent? So, in my opinion, this is Aldo Pietropaolo opinions, like role-based access control, attribute-based access control, that doesn't even apply. It's more like intent-based access control,
Intent-based access control.
right? Yeah, it's a completely different world, Mark. Again, I will say I'm not an expert at that. I'm just, my juices are flowing around um, a completely different way of providing access control and access management and authentication authorization to agentic systems, because they look fundamentally different. I've written an agent myself, an MCP server myself, and interacted with both, and I'm a student of the agentic platform protocols and so forth that are coming up to speed in the horizon and so forth. And um, it's 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 different. It's fundamentally different. You need somebody that's another thing from a career perspective for my colleagues and everybody, right? We're all learning this stuff as because we're traditional identity and access management,
Sure.
people. We need to get up to speed on agentic platforms, and we're learning how these agentic platforms operate. And the deeper you dive into agentic platforms and artificial intelligence, the more focused and nuanced you have to get when solving problems and use cases. And you almost can't uh, pinpoint, right, the problem per se, because a problem may manifest for 2 hours, Mark, not to mention, 3 minutes. Versus in today's world, if a problem manifests, the problem is always going to be there. Like, I'll give an example. Like, Mark doesn't have the right attributes for access control, so he's not authorized to access this resource. And we know that that's a problem. It's a static problem. You could see it plainly, discover it, and it lasts. It's permanent. In the AI world, the problem may only manifest under certain circumstances, certain prompts, certain intents, certain context, and you might see it once or twice a quarter, and
Interesting.
for 2 hours. So you can't. How do you how do you report on that? How do you audit that? How do you extract the telemetry, this fancy word for information that the systems send, to get normalized, transformed, gathered, and reported on under a business context so that the business understands during these 2 hours we saw this problem manifest, and we have the entire uh, agentic chain built into that,
So
including
you mentioned
identity. Identity is a small piece.
so you're mentioning the chain of that. There's that problem that's manifested was manifested because of Mark 2.0's activities or Aldo 2.0's activities. Like, how do we make sure I don't know, like bind back to who Flesh and Blood Aldo is or Flesh and Blood Mark is? Like, how do we figure out that chain of custody for documentation? Like,
It's very hard. We don't know yet. Or I don't know yet. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but it's a very difficult problem. Very difficult. And it's the fundamental problem that is going to face our customers is trust, auditability in that agentic chain. And and reminder, it's not just identity in the chain. There's other factors of trust, cryptographic trust, um, chain of custody, uh, data lineage, agent lineage, outside of identity. Who's the parent agent? Who are the sub agents? What were the prompts? What was the context at that specific time when the agents evaluated the context? All that stuff. Because if the AI goes rogue, you're gonna need to prove that indeed you had the right controls in place and that the AI was constrained so that it cannot go fully rogue to the point where it's going to disrupt somebody's business.
hmm. I mean, you're you're putting agita in my stomach and our audience's stomach in probably all the best ways. Like we're all challenged with these problems, and I know
Yeah.
that we hear from the private preview audience that they're just being told, "Go figure this out." There isn't one path in all of this, and I think you just hit on. Could you repeat again, kind of those areas that you see as like where we need to start, like
Yeah, I mean,
where they might start?
outside of identity, like, I mean, because
Like trust.
I look at this holistically. So it's, observability, what's the agent doing?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to answer why the agent took an action. Never mind did it have access? Who the agent is working on behalf of? Who was the parent agent if it's a sub agent, in a flow? And how do you prove that in a moment in time that you had the right controls to guard data and to guard um, runtime operations between agents, as well as, for example, between MCP servers and backend resources and tools that the agent needs in order to achieve its role, its outcome. So all those things need to come together in a way that can be easily, excuse me, reportable on, audited on, and that you actually have proof of the entire flow, the agentic flow, starting from the human all the way through the end of the transaction, whatever the agent or agents. Because what I'm also finding out as part of my research is that enterprise agentic platforms and systems for any given role or outcome or goal, it may use tens of agents, even reaching 100 agents to do its job. One, if you have a complex, action or goal to achieve, it may take multiple, agents in a agentic chain, as I call it. And the key is how do you instill the right, security controls, the privacy controls, the governance controls, the observability, and the identity controls, which is where Strata focuses, is on identity and so forth, and some on the governance as well, and some on the observability. But fundamentally, that's going to be some, very critical to solve, and it's just starting. We're all working on this, together, and colleagues in the industry are working on it hard, including in the working groups and so forth. So we'll get there as a community of experts, but it's just starting.
I mean, I'm going to ask you a question then that I probably already know the answer
Yeah,
to is that the systems of today probably just aren't there to solve these challenges as you've
yeah,
outlined necessarily.
yeah. Right,
Yeah, it's,
right.
it's,
I mean, OAuth and OIDC, they're very good at kind of identifying who the human actor is, and it can mint, tokens, for lack of a better term, that you can use to transfer the context between one agent to another. But if it were that simple, it would be phenomenal. But it's not. And maybe there's better protocols that can be ingrained into that agentic flow that I'm talking about. Aside from OAuth and OpenID Connect, those frameworks were created for traditional applications in the pre AI, pre agentic world. So they're going to have to evolve if they're going to be implemented and adopted in a substantial production-like manner within the next, couple of years, 4 or 5 years. They need to evolve.
slightly different angle here. So you've spent a lot of time and effort looking into CAPE and
But yeah,
working with the shared
hmm
signals framework. And is there an intersection as we think, from an architecture perspective, is there an intersection of that and
yeah.
agentic workflows?
Maybe, maybe, and
Okay.
a
All right.
big shout out to Atul. Hi, Atul, love you. I've been talking to Atul, Tulsi Bagwali, the creator of Cape, about this, and there may be an area for Cape, and the area would be because remember that agentic chain that I was talking to you about, and the observability and trust that you need to have within that chain. Cape would be so fantastic because at any moment in that chain, you need the ability to, in real time, invalidate that and break that chain so that it doesn't cause any harm based on a signal, right? Let's say Mark was an adversary, and Mark started the agentic chain, and all the agents are doing Mark's bidding, and then all of a sudden, we found out it was Mark.
Giving me too much credit here,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
nevertheless, I love it. I've got my
yeah.
minions doing their thing. Yes.
Mark is like, oh no, so we find out that you're an adversary. You need to send a flare into the agentic platform, right? And say, hey, Mark is actually an adversary. Stop. Like stop all the processing. So Cape is perfect for that. It's sending a shared signal into the agentic platform that says, hey, Mark's an adversary, halt. And so the agents, all of them, for that particular set of tasks, which by the way, in my mind, the tasks would be provable and cumulative across the agentic chain so that you could, no pun intended, chain all the agents together into one particular set of outcomes. So then again, no agent should be autonomous really, in that model. But anyways, that aside, um, Cape can be useful to send that flare in there to break that chain and then have all the agents halt and say, whoa, we have an adversary here, report the telemetry to the SOC, Security Operations Center, and I'm going to record my particular memory state and the whole chain state and write it into an audit log that it's immutable and provable, that an auditor can quickly go boom, boom, boom. Okay, when was the time period of that adversary? Oh, I see. Whoa, the agents received a CAPE event, and the whole chain stopped. And here's the date and time. Here's the cryptographic proof. Here's the at that moment in time. It's critical. At that moment in time, these particular agents had elevated privileges across these across these MCP servers. The MCP servers then had elevated privileges for this, and that. Double check the data lineage to see what was exfiltrated, if anything, right? And have that whole process under under control, for lack of a better term. That doesn't exist today at all. And in order to really adopt AI, in my opinion, right, AI and agentic frameworks, is that whole problem set must be solved. It's critical for it to be solved in order to go into production. Like I don't see any enterprise customer really using agentic platforms in production unless all this has been well thought of and tested and executed and so forth. Because this could bring down an enterprise if
Right.
not
And I
planned
mean,
well.
and again, we warn our audience, this might be fear inducing, but hopefully they're already thinking this exact same thing. I think you're going to get a lot of nods of agreement. Um, Kind of just going back to where we started the conversation, and I want to bring it back around. The traditional zero trust definition of
Yeah.
trust never, verify always. You took us down a little different path here of trust first. Is a future state, like when these problems get solved out, come back around to trust never the agents, that we don't have the rogue things, or is it? Am I looking at it through the wrong lens? Is it always going to be a trust first with context, trust first with intent?
Yeah, I think my opinion, I think it's going to be more of a trust first with intent and context. Now, I want to clarify something for the audience. I'm not saying don't implement security and guardrails and guidelines and policy and so forth. I'm saying that explicitly ensure that a agentic platform security and governance management program in the enterprise exists so that when new agentic platforms are procured and tested and so forth, they're following certain trust frameworks and guidelines that make it easier to adopt the platform. So trust first doesn't mean no security.
Good
It
clarification. Love
actually
that.
means hardened security. Like it's got to be trust first, and the way we trust first is by having X, Y, Z in place. And if you are audited and pass through the right uh, controls and testing throughout the entire chain, then you come out as a trusted entity. At the end of the day, you are trusted. So if we vet, let's say Mark, for 6 months through a series of controls, and you've passed every single one with flying colors, then I can consider you a trusted, component in my infrastructure. So unless proven otherwise. But of course, there's monitoring, there's auditing, built into how you're going to be used in the enterprise, or an agent or agentic platform is going to be used in the enterprise. So it's a lot more business friendly without giving way on security controls, if that makes sense. Because ZTA is like, don't like stop. Like, I'm not going to give you any access. So, and there's been cases where it's not efficient for the business. So you have to find that, that mix.
Well, with just a couple of minutes left,
Yeah.
I just thinking about the state that a lot of our private preview members and audience are in right now as everyone's experimenting.
Hmm.
You mentioned that you're still learning yourself. You might have one or two tidbits of where our audience might go learn more themselves. Has there been any particular
Oh yeah.
resources that have been useful for you that you could share, that they could go learn from as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say first and foremost, go to the agentic platforms, like, go to the GCP platforms, the AWS Bedrock, for example, is a very good platform to learn from. The Microsoft platforms as well. But, even N8N for agent orchestration and so forth. But and this is the way I learn. The way I learn is by actually getting my hands into code. So actually writing an implementation, actually write an agent and write an MCP server and orchestrate it together and include an LLM, and go to your, OpenAI subscriptions for access to the LLM, get an API key, do the same for Claude and so forth, and implement something so that you can see all the different components in action. That's what I would recommend, because it's the easiest way to learn. You'll see exactly what the agentic platforms are doing. You'll see what the LLM is what the role of the LLM is in something like this, and you'll quickly see the security gaps. You'll quickly see the auditing gaps. You'll see the trust gaps. You'll see all the gaps that were introduced with these type of frameworks, and that'll get you up and running. So my biggest piece of advice is,
Learn by doing.
learn by doing, get your hands dirty, and in the future, and I'm talking about in the very near future, you know, I would say involve your advisors. So involve advisory, agentic advisory, AI advisory, cybersecurity advisory, identity advisory, and bring everyone together as a kind of round table, and surround yourself with advisors that have been there before you, kind of like trailblazing. If you want to have a smoother walk, let's say if you're taking a hike, it helps if there's 5 people in front of you with machetes that are encountering, the the jungle. They're they're clearing a path, right? And then hey, by the way, I learned this, like that snake with those colors, it's venomous. Watch out for that snake. And you're like, hey, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for the advice, right? So tread carefully, right? And always look for advisors. I think that's a key thing. I personally look for advisors everywhere I go, and again, I don't assume to be an expert at the agentic world. Fairly, I'm well versed, but not an expert. And I surround myself with advisors, and I listen a lot. Right? And
And community too,
in
right? And
community,
that's I mean, that's
absolutely.
why we're part of this private preview. There's
My
probably
goodness,
competitors who are in the private preview,
of course,
but at the same time, we're learning from each other because it's all evolving at the same time together. We're all
yes.
here. No one person's truly an expert yet because it
That's
changes every
that's
week.
the thing. That's the thing. Like, that's beautiful. Like, I attend the OpenID Foundation community group for AI, for identity, agentic, and AI identity, and there's tons of wealth of professionals in there, seasoned subject matter experts that I learn from and then I engage with, and it's a community group. It's not a working group, so there's no standards being developed or anything, or it's just literally, to your point, it's a community, like experts coming together and saying, whoa, how do we How do we solve this? How do we solve that? How do we solve this? How
Who
do we
saw the poisonous colored snake before and learned from that and can share
Yeah,
with somebody
and
else. Yeah.
share it. Yeah. So I think that's the other big piece of advice before we break, Mark, is listen more than you speak right now. Let's just listen. And it's amazing what the world will open to you if you just sat back and just listen. You will learn so many things. But that's just might be personal to me. You know me. You know the way I work, I operate,
I
and
think it's good advice.
and even this podcast episode, right? I talk a lot, but I'd rather not talk a lot. I want to
I
listen
made you.
more.
That was the
Yeah.
point. So you're allowed. There's your out. But no, I hope
But
our
I love
audience
Mark.
learned a
I love
lot
working with
listening
Mark.
to you and enjoyed this. We don't have all the answers. We're learning.
That's
So
right. That's right. And it's exciting, right? Because we don't have
it
all the
really is.
answers, and I love it. I love it, and I love interacting with the community and with our customers and with everyone around us. It's just awesome.
Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah,
Use the Slack community to reach out to us. We want to talk more. We want to interact with everyone. Aldo, thank you so much for the time.
you're
Obviously,
welcome.
lots of disclaimers. It's a discussion. We're still learning. We're still like trying to shape everything and understand it and define it. But I think you gave us some real interesting food for thought here as everyone's trying to learn. Experiment. By doing and learn from that, and hopefully we can give them some tools to help with that experimentation.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
thank you, Aldo.
Okay, awesome.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Please check for our next episode, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.